Lib Dem here 17 years ago to speak mainly on education. I was married to an RAF officer for 30 years and we moved 24 times, so my career is a total mess. But I did end up working for City and Guilds for 20 years on skills and vocational qualifications. And I am passionate about those sorts of qualifications, and that young people who have practical skills should have those recognised and not feel that they're always second best to the people who have academic skills. Because I did reflect when I went to work for City and Guilds that I got my degree because I had a love of medieval French, which has been of absolutely no use to me whatsoever later in life. Whereas people who had City and Guilds qualifications actually do and make and, you know, create, they were employable. I don't think I was employable really, except of course in those days you could drift into being a teacher without any further qualification, which is a massive mistake. All right, good. I've got my colleague Alistair here, so all is well with the world. Right, anyway, so let's crack on with this because we've got a wonderful panel here. We've got 4 people to speak to us. We've got Parminder, Commissioner of Social Mobility Commission, Lucy McLeod, Deputy Chief Executive Officer of East Kent Colleges Group, which I remember very well from my City and Guilds days. My goodness, they were busy. And Professor Sharon, Professor of Education in the School of Education, Community and Society at King's College London, and Joe Fitzsimons, Senior Manager Policy and Insights at EEMA and UKA and ACCA, Chartered Accountants, as I was reminded. Okay, so anyway, thank you very much for being here. So we will start with Parminder. I think it's you to kick us off here. And I think, how long have you got? 5 minutes? Have you know? How long
Probably I'll take a bit less, but that's fine.
Yes.
Thank you.
It doesn't tell me how long. How long have they got, Claudia?
3 to 5 minutes.
Three.
It's fine.
3 to 5. Oh, come on. Be generous. 5 minutes. Okay.
Thank you. Thank you, Sue. Well, and thank you to Policy Connect for inviting me here for this very important subject to say, how can we reduce the attainment gap between graduate and non-graduate routes into work? And you know, what really can the employers do to shift their policies and processes to do their part in closing this gap and providing many different entry routes for young people to get into work, because we all know how important that is to improve social mobility. So my name is Parminder Kohli. I represent the Social Mobility Commission here, but as a day job, I also work for Shell. I have been for the last 23 years. And I'm just starting 2 new jobs in basically 9 days. One would be to chair Shell in the UK, and secondly, to be the global head of sustainability for Shell. And I can tell you, I just came from our AGM this morning, and there were a lot less friendly crowd than what I see around the room here today. I'm glad that I don't have any eggs or some flour thrown at me. So at least I feel like I can be presentable here.
They're not allowed to bring flour. Yeah.
That's good to hear. All right, so I feel like I'm with more friendly people. But what is Social Mobility Commission all about? It's an independent body set up by an Act of Parliament. The real mission or reason of Social Mobility Commission is it exists to see a country where circumstances of birth do not determine your outcome in life. And I think we can all sign up to that very, very lofty goal. One of the things which the Commission does, which is part of its statutory requirements, is to publish an annual State of the Nation report, which just looks at progress and sometimes the lack thereof in social mobility in the country. So that's one of the key things that the Social Mobility Commission does. Another thing it does is, because it's an independent voice in the whole world of social mobility, it does look at evidence and commissions some reports and studies to look at what interventions do make a difference when it comes to social mobility outcomes. Now, today we're here to talk about skills and talent. And skills and talent is one of our 4 pillars or priority areas for the Social Mobility Commission to look at, because we know that makes the biggest difference in the outcome of young people getting into work. So what we know that is the young people really need different pathways to get into work. And what we've seen is we just recently published our report in September, the last State of the Nation report. And the data there was that 21% of young people from lower we're talking about the lowest socioeconomic backgrounds, the lower working class, who are not in education, employment, or training, which is almost double the number you'd see from a socioeconomic status just above theirs. So that's really the nub of the problem. that over the many decades that we've looked at social mobility, it's that bottom end of the population where some of the most persistent lack of social mobility exists. And it exists mostly in the young people because we can see that that number is staggeringly large. And it's almost fashionable for people, and not to say that it's not important, that people look at long range mobility. How can we get some of the brightest people from disadvantaged backgrounds, pull them into higher education, get them into best universities, and create a pathway to be the most senior people in the most sort of difficult of professions to achieve success, whether it's law, accountancy, chief execs of large companies, or public sector. But what we forget is, we need to create many different pathways and not just this one golden path, which is, sort of rags to riches story, which it is not to say it's not great to have those examples, but if we only focus on that narrow band, then we forget the endemic issues that we have at the bottom end of the population, where the employers need to do a lot. And 30 million people are employed in this country, and the employers, where they set up businesses, how they bring people into work, the outreach they do. And it's also a business imperative, because if the employers don't do that, then they're not looking at the best talent that exists in the country to pull up in their organization. So it's a business imperative. It's also a moral imperative for employers to think about what is their routes into work, what is their outreach, and what kind of career path are they giving to the society at large. So I'll stop there, because I think the panel will uncover lots of the blockers which exist for this to happen. But I think as a commission, we say it's very important the role that employers play in developing skills and talent in the broader population. They need to work a lot in terms of the different routes they provide the young people to get into work. And in doing that, are they focused at the top end of the disadvantaged population, or are they focused where the real problems lie, which is the 21% which are also not in employment, education, or training?
Yes,
So
yes,
stop
which is
there.
yeah. Thank you very much, Parminder. That's set us off to. I apologise, Claudia. You did tell me they had 5 minutes each.
Yeah.
I should have read my brief more closely, shouldn't I? Anyway, right. So thank you very much. And so we now come to Lucy from East Kent Colleges Group. So your 5 minutes, Lucy.
Thank you. So yeah, I'm here today to give the further education perspective on this. Just a little bit about East Kent Colleges Group. So we have 6 colleges, 4 of which are in coastal areas, and we serve 96 of the most deprived neighbourhoods in the country, similar to many FE profiles, to be honest. But we also have one of the highest numbers of learners with educational healthcare plans, over 1,000 of those, 300 of care experience learners, and 42% of our students have a declared learning difficulty or disability. And many of them have come from that 21%. And that is the role of FE, really. It gives many students and young people and adults a second chance. 60% of our students are studying at level 2 or below. And I just want to really take my 5 minutes to highlight a couple of the provisions that we've put on to try and address the very point that Parminder just talked about. So we've set up 3 junior colleges, and these are for 14-year-olds to attend college full-time and specialise in a technical route that they're passionate about, and they study their GCSEs alongside that. So we specialise in catering in one college, animal management and conservation in another, business and creative in another. And often these students are ones that have dropped out of school. They've become electively home educated or not educated at all. And they've been given an opportunity. And I have to say that it's life-changing opportunity. However, we are funded at FE rates at a 5-day provision. It makes no contribution to the college, and we do it because we believe it's the right thing for our local community. But unfortunately, a lot of FE colleges can't afford to put on this provision. So we need to do something about that, because there'd be lots more opportunities for those young people if we could. We're also working very hard with our local heads of school to identify the gaps in provision for those neat young people. And we are about to set up an alternative provision centre in one of our communities that has a significant education gap for those young people. But again, FE funding is £4,000 per learner less than if a school did it.
Yes, it's iniquitous.
And every FE college should be doing something like this. But again, it takes a very solid FE college with some funds to back it to be able to do that. And these are opportunities that we are losing. And then my last point I really wanted to make is about careers advice. That's one of the topics today. Pre-16, we're still not getting enough young people having an informed choice of what they have as options post-16. I was talking to one of my student presidents last week. I brought him to a Policy Connect event last week, and I asked him about his careers advice at school only 2 years ago. And he said he had to actively look for his colleges nearby the choices.
Yes.
When he went back to school and told them what he decided to do, the response to him was, well, you'll be surrounded by a bunch of idiots.
Ah,
And there was an air of disappointment around him. And we really do have to change this if these young people are going to have the opportunities that they absolutely deserve. And alongside that, linked to what Parminder said about employers, we do have a problem, a significant issue in terms of recruiting specialists in engineering, plumbing, gas,
Yes.
computer science. And until we address that, unfortunately, we won't have enough staff to actually help these young men who aren't employed to get into employment. I was with a group of gas apprentices yesterday, and they have been waiting for an assessor. Well, we've had a vacancy for 2 years, and we are constantly trying to. We nearly got somebody. Unfortunate, they work for British Gas, but the money is just not enough.
no.
And this is a real problem. So we've got to work with employers to help us to get people back into teaching as well, to maybe 1 day a week come in and give these young people the benefit of their wisdom and experience. But it is a problem because they won't have these opportunities if we don't have the people to teach them.
No, very true. It always has been. I always think one of the great problems, and in the coalition government, I had the heady task of being a government minister for a Lib Dem. That was dead exciting. But in DfE, it always struck me that virtually all civil servants and all politicians had gone a university route. They didn't know anything about FE. You know, if I mentioned vocational qualifications, even the brightest young civil servants would look at me fairly blankly. And I thought, this is the trouble. There's a lack of understanding. But of course, schools are still really measured on their university intake,
That
aren't
is
they?
a problem.
And I remember saying to Michael Gove, wouldn't it be a good idea if schools were encouraged to celebrate their apprentice leavers with the same enthusiasm as their university? Oh, what a good idea, Sue, he said, and did absolutely nothing at all about it. And so, you know, the fact that
Yeah, we're driving
that your
behaviours
chap
by the
was
way we're
totally-
measuring their success.
yes, it's disappointing. Not good, not good. Thank you very much, Lucy. Right, we now come to Sharon from King's College, who's going to talk to us about inequalities in the school experiences of young people taking vocational and more traditional routes.
Okay, thank you.
Carry on.
So I'm going to pick up a lot of the different things that you've all just spoken about, starting with the point Sue just made, that when we judge schools, the accountability systems focus on measures like exam results, access to university and employment. My work is about social justice in education, and what I want to focus on in my brief opening remarks is not outcomes but experiences. The experiences of young people in school, and we need to think about that as a social justice issue as well. And in particular, the experiences of the 50% of young people who don't go to university. So I'm currently involved in a research study called Young Lives, Young Futures, which is funded by the ESRC. It's a 5-year study being run jointly by a colleague at King's College London and the Edge Foundation. And this research includes a survey of over 10,000 15 to 16-year-olds in England. And amongst other things, we asked the respondents to tell us about their experiences of school. Now, on all of these questions, the battery of questions we asked about attitudes and experiences of school, young people from low-income backgrounds, those with special educational needs and disabilities, and those who say they're unlikely to go to university are much less likely to say they enjoy school, feel noticed or listened to by teachers, or receive encouragement from their teachers. So just on this last measure, less than a third of young people who say they think it's very unlikely that they'll go to university, so that 30% of these young people, only 30% said they received encouragement from their teachers in school. That compares to 70% from those young people who said it's very likely that they would go to university. So these young people are going through their school lives feeling discouraged and unhappy and not belonging. Now, alongside the survey, we've interviewed 120 young people, focusing on those who said they're not interested in going to university. And these interviews have enabled us to try and unpick what it is that so many of these young people find alienating about school. You won't be surprised to hear that many pointed to the narrow academic focus of the curriculum, the mismatch between their preferred, more practical approaches to learning, so picking up on what you were saying earlier, Sue, and the approaches that they were subject to, which involve a lot of rote learning and exam preparation. So many reported feeling lost, overwhelmed, behind with their work, under pressure to succeed according to constructions of success that didn't align with their own interests and values. Now, you'll be pleased to hear, Sue, that this contrasted starkly with experiences of those in alternative provision and FE college, who were generally a lot more positive. And that's because they said they felt more seen and recognised in those settings. And that's due to a combination of the more hands-on practical approaches to learning that they were benefiting from, smaller class sizes, and a greater degree of autonomy over what and how they learned and the pace in which they learned. And they said that the teachers in those settings had more time for them, regarding them as adults and generally valued and cared about them. I'm conscious in saying these things, I don't want to overgeneralize, because of course there's amazing practice in schools and not everything about FE colleges is perfect, but that's what these young people were mostly telling us. And most of the young people, picking up on the theme of careers advice, said they had very limited experiences of careers advice. Some weren't receiving any at all. Some mentioned that schools were selective in which students they supported, giving more attention to those at the top of the class. And many reported that the advice was skewed in favour of directing young people to university. Some young people who made non-university career choices said that the teachers didn't understand or approve of their choices. So, for example, one young woman, Isabel, who wanted to work with horses, described her career choice as controversial, saying that her teachers found it difficult to understand that choice, and asked to expand. She said, lots of people don't agree that horses should be a job because you get so little income from it. And Kat, a sixth form student who wanted to be a hairdresser, said she didn't feel that she could share that aspiration with her teachers in her sixth form because they would have told her there's no point you being here right now. So embedded in the school experiences of these young people are a series of interlocking values hierarchies, which construct academic subjects and modes of learning as more valuable than creative and practical ones, and professional and managerial occupations as more valued choices than jobs that don't require a university education. And those latter jobs include many of the low-paid, insecure jobs such as childcare, which those of us in higher paid, more secure occupations rely on to be able to do our jobs. Yes. They also include shortage occupations such as equine care, the area of work Isabel wanted to go into, which she said wasn't a choice that was intelligible to her teachers because it was so poorly paid. Yet this is an occupation that the Migration Advisory Council has recently recommended should be added to the shared shortage occupation list. So here's a young person wanting to do a job that's needed, but she feels is not understood or valued at school. And these value hierarchies aren't just a disincentive for young people to take non-university education and training routes, but they also have a direct impact on the quality of their school experiences, the support invested in them, their sense of being recognised as making legitimate choices, and ultimately their sense of self-worth. So just to conclude, what needs to be different? 7 recommendations have already recently been made by others that will go some way to dismantling these value hierarchies. So these include the recent calls by the House of Lords 11 to 16 Education Committee and the Skills Commission's calls for a broader 11 to 16 curriculum and policies to tackle disparities in the funding of academic and technical routes for 16 to 19-year-olds that Lucy was just talking about, and the status given to technical routes and careers advice. And also to be welcomed is the Social Mobilities Commission's move to redefine the social mobility problem in a way that seeks to promote access to good, well-paid local jobs in place of its previous exclusive focus on access, equalising access to professional and managerial occupations. But in addition to those things, I would suggest we also need to be calling for fundamental changes to school organisation and funding that would enable schools to replicate some of the practices the young people appreciated in their alternative provision and FE settings. More flexibility and choice over what and how they learn, and more time to be able to develop meaningful relationships with and be seen and heard by their teachers.
Are you
And this
coming
is
to
the
an end?
final thing.
Oh, right.
These changes will
Yeah.
not be sufficient without a dismantling, or at least very real erosion of the hierarchies of status, pay, security and working conditions associated with different occupational roles that sustain the current gap between graduate and non-graduate employment outcomes. A lot of lip service is paid to valuing that work, and these workers were celebrated during COVID as key workers. But to go beyond mere lip service, more holistic system-wide work needs to be done to ensure these jobs are properly valued within schools and more widely in society.
Thank you very much. Yes, both Alistair and I were on that committee of 11 to 16, and we took evidence from so many, from head teachers, from pupils, from unions, from just about everybody. And they were all saying that GCSEs are not fit for purpose. There should be a much more practical role. We had Ken Baker on it, who was passionate about computers, that we must be teaching computers and digital instead of old-fashioned subjects. And the only person who thought the knowledge-based curriculum was wonderful was Nick Gibb, who'd been a schools minister for more years than anybody should be a schools minister. And we had to refrain Ken Baker from throttling him because he was getting so angry, wasn't he, with what Nick Gibb was saying. Oh no, what we need is knowledge. You don't need so much knowledge. You can get access to knowledge in all sorts of ways. You need the skills to be able to manage it. Anyway, enough of that from me. Joe, now we come to you, the role of employers and professional bodies can play to remove barriers and bias from recruitment processes.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Pleasure to be here, and thank you for the invitation. Just a little bit about us before I start my brief comments is we're the Association of Chartered Certified Accountants, so we're the global professional body for professional accountants. And we have about 100,000 accountants who are members here in the UK, and about 250,000 accountants around the world. And we have about 500,000 students going through our qualification at the moment, and they'll be our future members. One of the things we're most proud of with our membership and with our qualification is the open access and the entry point that there is for everyone. 68% of those students who have started our qualification come from non-graduate routes, and there's a route through for people no matter what their existing level of qualification or knowledge or foundation levels, that many come through and work their way through the qualification. And we're very proud of how it can change people's lives and the opportunity it can afford them to change their lives. One of the things I just wanted to focus on very briefly is a report that we launched last week, which is called UK Talent Trends 2024. So this is a longitudinal study we do. It's the second year we've done it, and we'll be doing it again next year. And we had about 1,200 people in the UK respond from within our profession. I think the really telling thing when I get into some of the stats from it is actually these are all people who are in the profession already, so they've managed to break through into a profession that is sometimes perceived as quite difficult to break into. But actually, we looked at things around social mobility, ED&I, amongst other things in the report. Almost 2/3 of the people who responded, and actually even more of the female respondents than the male, stated that a strong inclusivity and diversity culture is a key factor in deciding where they would like to work. Really important for us because there's a real sort of war on talent within the profession and a real shortage of those coming in and coming through. And the same proportion believe that their current organization, so about 2/3 say that their current organization is a inclusive organization where all employees are equally valued. And that was actually a little bit higher in Scotland than we saw in England and Wales. But of course, that highlights that there's still a lot of work to do, because that's only 2/3 of people. And 12% said that a lack of employee equality is one of their leading workplace concerns. So about 1 in 10 people, again, very telling, that's at the top of the list, above things like the inflation, impact of inflation on pay, and mental health and other concerns. So a lot of this is more positive than we see when we look at the global picture. We also surveyed about 10,000 people globally for this study, and the UK does score better than globally. So in the UK, 22% said that a low socioeconomic background is still a barrier to progression for them within their organization. Again, very concerning, but that was even higher when you look globally. So that was 34% globally. So there are some sort of green shoots of hope that things are moving in a positive direction in the UK, and these stats are a little bit more positive than we saw the previous year, but of course, huge amounts of work still to be done. A third of people who responded said that they feel their employer takes a very narrow view of social mobility and diversity. So there's that piece around people actually understanding what all of this means, and understanding it on a more intricate level. So, for example, perhaps ignoring things like neurodiversity and age-related aspects of some of this as well. What the report goes on to do, and I would encourage you to take a look if you have the opportunity, is actually set out some steps that organizations and employers should consider, and sort of checklists of things that they can consider. So, for example, on unconscious bias in the recruitment process, the things around fostering empathy and about challenges faced by those other than yourself, addressing toxic work cultures and tribalistic tendencies that leave out sort of outsiders from a profession or from a organization, training managers to recognize things like microaggressions. So looking at some of those more detailed steps that organizations, actionable things that organizations can look at. There's other sections of recommendations that look around leadership representation, equal opportunity to equal access to opportunities, and so on and so forth. So there's quite a lot to unpick in there, but I think to conclude my brief remarks, the accountancy profession has made progress over the course of the last couple of decades on some of this stuff, but there's still a huge amount of work that needs to be done, and all of the stats I've detailed are intended to highlight that really, and it's something that we to remain very mindful of. There has been progress around including people from all kinds of backgrounds, whether that be ethnic, gender, culturally diverse, etc. So social mobility based things as well. But I think the other thing we would say is we're very keen on remaining as transparent about some of the progress and lack of progress. So the FRC Key Facts and Trends in the accountancy profession is published publicly, and that's available with both details into the different characteristics broken down by the different bodies. So I would encourage you to perhaps take a look at that as well. But I think the main thing I want to say is lots of work left to do, but there are things that organizations can begin to do, even if they are just moving in the right direction.
Thank you very much. Well, we've had 4 very powerful presentations there. So we'll just now have a few minutes looking at particular issues. So the first question, how we can close the gap between graduate and non-graduate outcomes for young people. How can changes to employer recruitment policies help to address the current skills shortage? And how can we incentivize stronger place-based networks that promote access to tertiary education, including apprenticeships, higher and further education? Interesting, I think apprenticeships are becoming a little bit more popular now that young people see, the scale of the student debt if they go to university. But the parents are often the hardest nuts to crack in this, aren't they? Because they all seem to want their children to go to university. Anyway, any thoughts from any of them? Who wants to start on that? Parminder, would you like to start with some thoughts on that?
Yeah, sure. I think let me just pick up on the point you said about apprenticeships. I think one of the key things we see is after the introduction of the apprenticeship levy, that there's been a fall in level 2 and level 3 apprenticeship, which actually predominantly go to more disadvantaged socioeconomic backgrounds. And there's been a rise of degree level apprenticeships, almost like the middle class has moved to capturing good school places to capturing good apprenticeship places. And we've seen a fall in the apprenticeships being offered by small, medium enterprises. So I think, well, all apprenticeships should be welcomed in some ways, but it shouldn't be that degree apprenticeships come at the cost of the level 2, level 3 kind of entry level
Yes.
jobs for people. And I think that is a big concern because as I talked about, you're not going to get the 21% one needs to suddenly take a degree level apprenticeship, which requires a higher qualification in
Yes,
maths to
yes.
begin with. So I
Yes.
think that's a little bit the challenge of balancing things out and creating routes into work, which at least allow people from more challenged backgrounds to get a step up in the workforce ladder in some ways.
Yes, of course, apprenticeships always used to be an entry to employment, didn't they? And so I think the fact that the apprenticeship levy, of which there's great problems with that, and so employers use it for higher level employees, it's not the right thing to do, I think.
Or giving specialist training or executive education to
Yes,
their
yes,
staff
yes.
rather than actually skills
Yes.
training for people at the entry level of their workforce. in some way.
Absolutely, yes. Lucy, any comments on?
Yeah, I think that's a very valid point, and part of the report that was part of with Policy Connect the Skills 2030, there's a recommendation in there where it limits the percentage of apprenticeships that can be used at the higher level, because that is what levy payers are doing. They're directing it towards the level 6, 7.
Yes, yes.
And the numbers that drop at level 2 and 3 is quite dramatic and very disappointing to see. And I do agree, though, that with the cost of higher education going up, that young
Yes.
people do want to look at alternatives.
Yes, yes.
But there are not. It's quite hard to get a higher apprenticeship.
Yes.
And there are limited places, and we need more.
Yes. And of course, for SMEs, it's often quite difficult because a lot of them are single person
They are.
SMEs. And so actually taking time out to train somebody
Mhm.
means they're taking time out from earning a living. So that's a difficult one. Yes. Any thoughts then, Sharon and Joe on these? Yes. Yeah, Sharon.
Well, I suppose I'd reiterate that part of the way to close the gap between graduate and non-graduate outcomes is to reduce the differentials, pay differentials and
Yes.
working conditions between the different kinds of jobs. But also, I think maybe sort of questioning this reliance of many employers on using university degrees as a sorting mechanism, which without wanting to be rude, feel like it can be quite lazy.
Yes,
Like why
yes.
rely on degrees for recruitment? I think employers could do more to value work experience and to value potential, and then
Yes.
invest in supporting their employees to develop their potential.
Yes, yes. Good point, Joe.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I fully agree, particularly on that point around sort of employers often having sort of, want for a better word, some arbitrary kind of criteria that they're trying to
Yes.
to assess by. And I think just to call out some of the great work that the Gatsby Charitable Foundation
Yes.
do with the education landscape, whereby it sort of looks to for SMEs or for all organizations sort of help them navigate a lot of the complexity. So if you're looking at T levels, if you're looking at apprenticeships, if you're looking at internships or work experience, what's the commitment from the employer? What's the commitment from the what support can you get from your local college, school, and from the universities,
Yes,
that kind of thing. So it really tries to bring some of that together. Because I think the thing that is fair for SMEs, but also for large organizations, is the complexity in the great variety of things that have evolved over the course of time. And that's not to
Yes.
say that that's not how it should be, but it's just very difficult for people to navigate some of that and work out how to get young people and people who want to change career paths at different points in their life into a particular opportunity is quite difficult.
Yes, I can remember the Association of Colleges when we were in government had a wonderful reception where they got real high flyers who were high flyers having started at colleges. And I got a very late phone call saying, Sue, the person presenting the prizes has dropped out. Please, will you come and present awards? One of them's to Colin Firth. So I said, don't worry, I'll be there. And again, but they had other people who, and he reckoned that FE had changed. He was hopeless at school. His parents were getting desperate. His father, I think, is an FE lecturer anyway. And he said at FE, he got all the encouragement he needed, and that sort of set him on a different path. And I think that is getting encouragement from different skills, isn't it? So what role does a place-based innovation funding play? The challenges in tertiary education, and what role can the careers system play in enabling progress? Right, who wants to start with that? Sharon, do you want to start with that little lot? Anything, because you did mention careers, I think. Yeah, well, I think most of it.
Careers.
Yes.
Yeah. So as I said in my opening remarks, the young people's experience of career support at school is really very poor and very limited. And it's because it's moved to a school-based system and it's become fragmented and it's completely underfunded. So I think what we argue for, based on our research findings, is that we need to restore a national system that serves localities and has strong links with schools, colleges and employers, and good points of informal access for young people. And that needs to be staffed by a specialist cadre of professionals, such that existed in connection and pre-connections days. And their own education and training needs to be thought about. And a big part of the remit needs to be thinking about how to make the most of people's talents and supporting young people, educators, employers, to all think about how to utilise the talents people have, both for the sake of the economy and to maximise young people's personal potential.
I'm not quite sure when the golden days of careers education were. I know my careers education when I was at school was, well, girls, most of you will get married, so you won't need a career. A few of you will go to university, so we don't have to worry about you. The rest of you can think of being a teacher, a secretary, or a nurse. And that was it. And some girls stupidly opted for a personal interview with this careers advisor. And when they came out, I said, what did he say? Well, he said I could be a teacher, a nurse, or a secretary. I mean, that was it, really. So it was very narrow in those days. But there were, of course, proper trained careers teachers, weren't there, at one stage? And then they all they seemed to disappear. It's not good. Still, yes, Joe, any comments on?
Yeah, I again fully agree. I think one of the things we're also hearing a lot about with things like AI and technology and the behavior change in the workplace today is people wanting more support from their employer. So actually we think a lot about people returning to the institution they once studied at, or seeking careers advice from various different sources, excellent sources, and it's great to have that variety. But I think employers actually have a role to play here as well in helping people access some of that support and helping people upskill. We have sadly a very low proportion of employer investment in skills in the UK when we look at ourselves by comparison to some of our EU counterparts and other counterparts globally. So I think there's really something about the culture that exists around investing in skills in your workforce, and there's that age-old fear of, if you don't train someone, if you train someone, they might leave, but actually if you don't train them, they might stay. So we like to remind employers about that. So
yes. Now, I remember when I was at City and Guilds, I was working with qualifications for the armed forces at one stage. And I remember talking to a very senior RAF engineer about giving external qualifications, because the military is very good at giving completely obscure qualifications that nobody understands except the military. But if they had a City and Guilds qualification, that was transferable. And he said to me exactly that. He said, the trouble is, Sue, if we give them those sorts of qualifications, they won't stay. And I said, well, if you don't give them this sort of qualifications, they're not going to be very keen to stay, are they? Because, you're not looking after them properly. Anyway, but the military has completely changed its views on that now, and they do actually give external qualifications for just about everything. Anyway, Parminder, what have you got a comment to say on?
Well, I'm going to pick up on this a different point which you raised earlier about, place-based innovation and growth, what impact does that have? Because, I think we'd all agree that talent is evenly distributed, but opportunities aren't. And, it's so important that, and we've seen that data, when we look at our social mobility report and we look at data, we see there are certain parts of the country which are what we call social mobility cold spots, because, and it's quite correlated to the economic growth in that area. So it's so important to create innovation and economic opportunities, because that by itself, it's sort of, rising tides lift all boats. So it's so important that the opportunities are created in different parts of the country. So it's, in some ways, you could say it is that whole leveling up agenda. But that means that, a lot of different constituents need to come together as the local authority, the educational institutes, businesses and the local businesses, to look at what are some of the skills shortages which are hampering local growth, the role that infrastructure plays, the local skills improvement program, which kind of brings everything together, which is also having a bit of a funding challenge. But I think it's not just looking at it from a very national level, because the issues could be very different, and it's got to be devolved to everybody who gets involved in that. And we as commissioners, just a few months ago, were in Blackpool, which you can all imagine is a pretty deprived part of the country. But then you
Yes,
can
yes.
see real pockets of innovation happening by just looking at Lancashire Energy Campus, which is quite linked to the energy skills required in that area, and how local authorities, FE College, are coming together with the
Yes.
government to look at infrastructure and skills shortage. So I would say there's a lot to be done, which is by bringing people together in the local areas where there's better understanding of their local challenges, and
Yes,
creating
yes.
opportunities so that people don't necessarily have to, up sticks and come all to London to
Yes.
actually achieve some degree of social mobility. Yeah.
Yes, because, yes, Lucy, what have you got?
When you said about when was the golden age of careers,
Yes.
I'm not sure we've ever cracked it, to be
No.
honest. I think you made the point that there's a huge amount of pressure on heads of schools in terms of their outcomes. We're completely focused on exams, results, and that drives that behaviour. And I don't blame them for that. I'll probably be doing the same if I was a head of a school. Also, some of them have got sixth forms that are quite small. And I know that heads that I know personally will say, if I close my sixth form, I'll lose some of my best teachers. So they have that pressure too. And I also think, I'm not sure if funding is the issue, actually. Of course, we need independent careers advice. That's really important. But I think at the end of the day, these young people, they listen to their teachers. And to no fault of their own, most of the teachers in schools, that's all they've known is A levels and then university. They don't know about their local FE college or other options, their independent training providers. And so that's the advice they give. And until we fundamentally fix that problem, we can train as many careers advisors as we like, but they go to those, they listen to them a little bit, and then they go to their teachers, and their teacher says something else. I think employers need to be more involved in schools. They can give great advice in terms of what are the options in their sector. Further education, Ofsted has now got a new enhanced inspection, which is all about skills. Maybe schools need something around that too, to measure how they're doing it differently, because we aren't going to change those behaviours if we don't change something fundamental.
No, of course, when we had I think it was the dreadful T-level bills, we have so many awful bills, I can't remember which one it was, but there was one of them, and the only amendment the government accepted was Kenneth Baker's for the Baker Clause, which was that every school must accept employers, FE colleges, and of course, university technical colleges. He was very anxious they should know about this. But of course, the change over there he prefers is the age of 14, which is not an age when most schools are wanting to let their kids go. And so this was put into legislation that schools must accept people to talk, because employers have difficulties getting into schools sometimes to talk to kids, and that they weren't just to talk to the little ones who were never going to pass exams. They were supposed to talk to everybody in the school to give them all the options of that. But I think that, talking to schools, I think that's not universal, is it? That schools are still not letting employers and FE colleges go in and explain what the alternatives are.
I think it's still quite selective.
Yes.
I think that it can be manoeuvred to tick the box that's been done.
Yes.
But there isn't a triangulation of checking that's been done with great integrity.
A couple of quick points on careers.
Yes.
One, I fully agree that the young people need to be making more informed choices about their options if they go one path versus the other, and that level of information is not very transparent, both with career advisors or with the young people themselves. So one of the report which was published was Inclusive Britain, and one of the actions among that was value of qualification, and how can you make that very transparent to people making those trade-off and these choices. And actually the Commission has published a report last year on value of qualification.
Yes,
I think the question is, how much is that understood by people giving advice and the ones seeking advice, because you can get a lot of university debt but not have a lot of value associated with it in your career. So I think that is a critical component of how do we get that information more widely known so people make more informed choices in some way.
Yes, yes, I think that's true. It's interesting because when I worked for City and Guilds, as I say, certainly I started off in hairdressing, but the construction industry and catering industry, you know, what really mattered to them was to have your City and Guilds. That was the only thing they would talk about, because they knew that those were the careers which could map out your forward plan. But that was people who were already within the FE sector, if you like.
Yeah.
It's getting them in there in the first place. Yes. Any other thoughts, Joe, Sharon? Any other thoughts on these?
I'm not sure if I have something else to add specifically on the careers.
No.
To what's been said, but I think to pick up on the point about employers and employer collaboration with schools, fully agree. I think there's really a lot more that, and for us as a professional body, there's a lot more we can be doing to champion employers who do some of that activity and sort of support some of that work. I think case studies are very powerful in terms of helping other employers understand what they could do.
Yes.
But I think just to echo that point about employers, I think that's really, really crucial, because it's reminding ourselves about sort of who are young people most likely to listen to, and it's often, even, you know, it's not often the people you'd hope that they might listen to. So it's finding those organic routes through to inspire and really kind of help them understand what the art of the possible might be. As something we're constantly grappling with in the accountancy profession. It's not as easy as you might expect to help people feel inspired about it. So I think case studies
go on.
case
Yeah.
studies are a really
Yes.
tool,
Yes.
so something to consider in that context as well.
And I think the other thing is that you do need to get careers advice into primary schools, because young people very early on start to gender identify, don't they? I mean, lots of sort of wonderful examples of little kids being told to draw an engineer or a doctor or whatever. And then they bring in sort of stunning women who are doing all these jobs which these little kids never for one moment thought women would do. And I think you do have to overcome that at an early stage, don't you? Otherwise, it's sort of fixed in their minds that this is what they do. Sharon, any other
I'm
comments?
just trying to think what the young people we speak to would be wanting me to say, because I feel like we're trying to represent their views and voices.
Yes.
I think one of the things they would say is they really want sort of proper one-to-one conversations that are focused on them and what they say is, unless you know what you need to do,
Yes.
careers advisors aren't very helpful. They'll just say, "Oh, do this," you know,
Yes,
go to your
yes,
personal
yes.
or not. They want someone to help them explore their interests, help them think about all the possible things that they might do.
Yes, yes.
And not have it as a sort of tick box exercise, which
Yes.
is what it feels like to many young people.
Yes.
So I do agree with what you're saying, that things need to change in the culture of schools, and teachers need to sort of be aware of the range of things that young people could go on to do, and not just press the route that they took themselves, but they also need independent professional careers advisors who are properly trained,
Yes.
who can really help you think about what are they passionate about, what steps do they need to take to get to where they could be.
Yes, yes. Right. Well, shall we open it up? Have we got any questions there? Claudia? Yes, sorry.
Can I bring in, because we're, in addition to our in-room audience, we also got quite a large audience online. And I've got one comment from someone online and one question maybe to kick things off.
Okay.
So the first comment is from Lara Sultan Mohammadi, who agrees with Joe about the finance profession improving in terms of social mobility and diversity over the years, but that there's still more that organizations can do. And she highlights Access Accountancy, specifically focusing on this for the accountancy profession and providing milestones to help them recognize what they can do more for their employees. And then we've got a question actually for the panel from Mark Gilman from the University of Derby, who asks, or who says, SMEs are being mentioned a lot and they make up 99% of all businesses, yet they also rarely value training and development, have a lack of understanding concerning their own skill requirements, and rarely understand how competitive advantage can be attained through their workforce. The question is, how do we incentivize them to change, is his question, specifically SMEs.
I think that's a really
That kicks
difficult one.
things off a bit.
Who would like to kick off? Oh, Alistair, would you
Yeah,
like to
please.
come in on, because Alistair knows a lot about SMEs.
Well, I was going to ask questions. Not,
Oh, I see,
not
okay.
answer these ones.
We're on the panel now.
All right. Yes.
I'm going to use this way. Well,
Okay, so that's SMEs is the first
uh,
question.
Yeah.
Yes, okay, we'll take 2 or 3 questions then.
okay. Well, I was going to give a reaction. I'm Alistair Aberdare. I'm a crossbench member of the Lords, and I found this very interesting. I've agreed with nearly everything I've heard, as is usual in these events. What is not so clear is how we're going to actually make some progress, because we've been talking for years about the imbalance in schools between academic and technical, and the need for greater parity of esteem and all these kinds of things. And from some of the things that I picked up, certainly I would like to see employers playing a stronger role, and I think both Lucy and Parminder alluded to that, because they do have clout. They do need people. Nearly every employer you talk to can't find people that they need and can't find skills that they need. They are fundamental to our national economy, and they're fundamental to providing good careers for our young people. So I think they should be seeking a more prominent role in addressing the issue of skills development and social mobility. And that includes SMEs, and one of the huge problems is with, for example, the apprenticeship levy is that it doesn't work for SMEs. And that could be fixed, because as we just heard, they are, whatever it is, 95% of the economy, and I think 70% of apprenticeships or something like that. And careers again, and the Baker Clause, we need more businesses going into schools, being involved in schools and helping schools. I see as quite a positive development, and again, Parminder mentioned it, the local skills improvement plans, because that is a vehicle for getting employers and other interested parties and careers hubs and whoever together at a local level and working on this. But it all comes down at the end. I just see the sort of dead hand of the Department for Education behind everything. I mean, I was sharing an event this morning about level 3, and we started with a very detailed explanation of how splendid T-levels were. And T-levels just seem to me to be recreating some of the problems of the existing academically focused approach, without addressing what we've heard about the issues for the lower social groupings who are facing the biggest challenges. So I just wonder how we can get more energy into this, whether parents can help, whether other departments, every other department needs, if you're going to achieve net zero, you need skills. If you're going to achieve a decent health service, you need skills. Every area we look at. Sue knows very well, I could rant about this for a very long time. I don't know if it's a question. It's certainly not an answer to what we've just heard, but I thought I'd like to say it.
Yes, fine. Right, we'll have a third one then. Yes, would you like to give a third one, and then we'll come back to the panel?
Okay, Bill Esmond from the University of Derby too. It's not a takeover. And I'm sorry to ask a difficult question, because I really admire the fact the Social Mobility Commission are asking questions about what employers could do differently, because usually we're always hearing about how could education do things differently so that employers get what they want, when, you know, employers don't always know. But my question actually links to what Sharon was saying about careers and looking at the breadth of young people's own experience and what they can bring to the situation. We've just come to the end of a 4-year research project on enrichment in colleges, looking at some of the different dimensions of learning that are taking place, again, without decent funding, without the resources to do these things properly. And we've learned so much about the breadth of what young people want to do during their studies beyond the skills for a job. And if we only teach the skills that are related to jobs, they're not exactly the same as what people do at work. And how to behave when they're at work, and how to do a job interview, and all these things that are now only focused at work, aren't we risking that we'll get people who don't have much to talk about at interviews, don't understand the full breadth of the jobs they're doing and the industries they're working in, who aren't able to cope with change? If we're too narrow in our focus on skills alone, and we don't give everybody the opportunity for breadth, like that would-be hairdresser in the sixth form, and like some of the things we do in other countries, if we don't offer that breadth to young people and solely focus on skills, aren't we actually making it more difficult for them to get good jobs and not easier?
Is the breadth that is actually missing at the moment. We're not teaching them how to do interviews. We're not teaching them how to work in teams. We're not teaching them creative skills. We're not teaching them project management skills, problem solving skills. These are the things that they actually need.
Yes.
And we're not even doing a good job of English and maths, as we heard on the committee, where 30% of them are failing their GCSEs and finding themselves condemned to endless resets.
Well, some of the things you've mentioned are broader
Yes.
than often happens in something
But
else.
of course, one of the mistakes is that they're focusing on GCSE English and Maths, which will have a whole load of stuff. You know, people really can get through life without Chaucer and without quadratic equations. But you know, it's all those. So and our committee was really saying we need functional skills and, you know, financial literacy and all those sorts of things which are relevant to people's lives rather than the abstract. Right. So team. Sorry, I've got my wonderful team here.
Could I react to a couple of
Yes,
points?
please do, Parminder. Yes.
Well, yeah. So one so what are we going to do about it? Because that is the $1 million question, isn't it? Well, it's not a shameless plug, but maybe it is, because in June we're having a launch of our action plan of the social mobility, because we said over the last couple of years we've been looking at evidence on what works and what doesn't, and what are some of the policy interventions we need to make as a government or as employers. So it's quite broad-based set of recommendation. And the event is here in the Parliament. So I think the Commission staff can give you detail for those who are interested. But there's some good recommendations which cut across many areas. And I wouldn't want to kind of go through all of the recommendations, but they're pretty comprehensive. But what I do want to talk about was employers and SME, because that's come up a few times. And I think I would start with the premise that SMEs are not willing to contribute their part in you know, making progress in this area, because we visited a bunch of SMEs in Blackpool. I think there's plenty of growth prospects that they have for their businesses. You know, they do it selfishly, and even the employers do it to some extent selfishly, because they need people and they need skills and talent. What we heard from pretty much every SME we spoke to, they had more demand than they could service, so they needed people. And they said we can actually even train people, so we don't mind training, but it's also a little bit about the behavior and the attitude with which some of the people are coming, and the young people. So that's a little bit their challenges. What are the softer skills we are teaching? And some of you alluded to that, in not just in terms of team settings, but just, you know, they were saying we have lots of demand for bricklayers. I mean, it was a construction company. But we just want our people to show up when they sign up. It's like many people sign up, come one day, then don't show up.
Yes.
And I'm talking about, because many of them are from families who never had any role models of people getting up and going to work. So I think we just have to not forget that there is a part of the section of the society where problems are quite endemic, and we need to work together. And it's not just about the skills challenge. It is about, you know, just what it takes to just earn a living. But they were very willing to play their part in helping people and get skills. So that was one. The other is employers, because I chair the employer advisory group at the Social Mobility Commission, and we have about 12 million employees out of 30 million covered in that group, including Association of Small Medium Enterprises. So they're very keen to play their part. And I think they're all saying that, you know, we want to look at social mobility as one of the characteristics, and especially doing outreach programs. We heard about that. You know, creating pathways, and, you know, there's a social mobility index of employers, and PwC happens to be #1 last year. And if you look at the range of programs they offer for intervening, you know, we'll all be quite gratified to say there are employers making step up changes in the whole pathway. So I wouldn't want to leave everybody feeling there's bleakness all around. There's pockets of glimmers of hope, but a lot more still needs to be done.
I'm glad we're not bleak. Lucy, would you like to follow on the non-bleak theme?
Well, I think my view is what can we do about it? I think we actually need curriculum reform pre-16.
Yes.
And unless we do that, we're not going to change, and we'll be here next year talking about the same things. And we need to change the way schools are measured, because there's so much pressure on them about exam results. We're measuring the wrong thing. And again, that won't change until we do that. In terms of your point about enrichment and the wider student experience, I totally agree with that. And one of our core values is ensuring that we have social action embedded in all our programmes, so that our students are giving back to the community and getting to know their community a bit better and valuing it. But unfortunately, policies such as increasing the English and maths number of hours is just making that curriculum offer even narrower from September next year, which isn't helpful. I would love to see more put into the enrichment side of our students' education. Unfortunately, just not funded for that. And that is our challenge around that. In my early career in FE, we had a Wednesday afternoon which was full of enrichment activities for students, which was funded. It was great. That's gone. And so it's a balance between getting them through more exams. Our technical qualifications have now moved towards more theory-based exams as well. And students do struggle with that. And we've talked about this before. They've come to learn practical skills. We're now moving to knowledge-based exams to assess their practical skills. And that's taking more time, and we're getting less time to do those other things that are, I would say, just as important.
Yes. Sharon, Joe, any comments on this lot? Okay, Joe.
On the sort of enrichment and wider student experience point, the other thing I think we're talking about, we look at in the world of work, people who are in the world of work, whether they're training at the moment, you know, at any level, whether they've just entered and they're trying to get into our profession or they're doing an apprenticeship, whatever. In terms of the mode of working in the UK, 64% of the people who responded to our research work in a hybrid way, working over half their time remotely. And I think when we think about social mobility in the context of sort of the support network and the connections that people build at that earlier stage in their career, and the informal learning and all those other enrichment elements, I think that's really important for us to not lose sight of, because of course, for you know, if we look at back pre-pandemic, many of us and others will have an experience of working full-time in an office and building your network, building your connections, support, and so on in that way. But now you have young people who are perhaps doing some work experience, perhaps doing placement year, all these kinds of things, and actually it's a very different experience. They're perhaps not building the same network in the same way and the same support, and it's some of that stuff that's harder to measure that you pick up through that sort of on the job, in the room experience that many people are kind of missing out on. So I think it's important for when we looked at our survey, fortunately a large portion of Gen Z were working in the office when we look at across the generations, but actually it's also looking at how does that work on the ground? Are sort of younger people in the office, and then the others that they'd be learning from not in the office. So it's looking at those sort of ways of working and how people become that cultural assimilation and all those other elements that come with it.
Yeah, I just want to echo what Lucy was saying, and just to make the point, it's not a reformed education system along the lines she's suggesting would be better for everyone, not just the people who don't go to university, because the current education system isn't doing preparing people for university either. So these it's all about rote learning, regurgitating material in exams. That's all that counts. Is the success of their lesson is judged by how much have they learned that they can regurgitate in an exam. That's not good preparation.
No, that's not
critically. Originally, so those young people aren't being prepared for university either. So this broader, more enriched curriculum would be better for everyone.
It would. Right, let's take yes there, and we'll go there first and then to you. And is there a third one around? So yes, the hand at the back. Yes. So yes, come to you first.
Yes, hi, my name is Grace Osborne, and I employed very recently as PwC and took us to number one in the end. But now work for Brand Jacobson, who also sit on the employer advisory group, and want to kind of give a bit of our experiences as employers. I've had the joy of being part of two, and probably the only two, social mobility teams in employers in the UK, which gives us loads of time and resource to focus on social mobility and all of this work. But an experience I had where we realised that a lot of the charities we worked with were focusing on exactly the same schools, and we wanted to reach those young people who need us the most. So we did a bit of a strategy exercise and looked at cold spots and used data tools and pulled together a list of 100 schools who we thought, right, let's go on their careers websites, find their careers leads and get into those schools who are not getting anything. Of those 100 schools, only about 50 had a working email address. The other 50 bounced back or said, we haven't had that person here for 4 years. 3 responded and none of them wanted to work with us, despite the fact that we would pay for their transport, we'd pay for their lunch, and we would even expense the cost of a cover teacher for the day so that they were not losing out on a member of staff for the day in school. And we are 2 businesses with a ridiculous amount of resource to do this, and probably the most amount of resource of any business. And I guess my sort of slightly rhetorical question is, if the businesses with the most amount of money and time resource to target those schools who are not receiving anything, can't get into them, those schools become gatekeepers and those children get no access. And so how do we remove the gatekeeper? Because the charities can't do it either. And I worry that lots and lots of really well-meaning social mobility initiatives actually entrench the inequality, because it's the same pupils and the same schools that are getting the access, who may meet high free school meal criteria, but are going to like 8 different employers.
Yes, yes, that's a really interesting point, I think. Right, so it was, yes.
Hi, Alex Super, parliamentary candidate for South West Hertfordshire. Actually worked at the Social Mobility Commission as well. It is again a bit of a rhetorical question, because I think there's a rigidity around education, but also more rigidity as to how we assess skills now. So I look specifically to things like digital skills and what's happening at the moment, which is the AI industrial revolution, for want of a better expression. So if you apply for a job, for instance, today, right, you have to use certain words, you have to know how to go on the right platform and input the right data in order for you even to get a look in and go to interview, because a lot of businesses are using automated screening tools. So this poses somewhat of a problem, because if you have young people gaining skills, going out into the workplace, but they don't have those very specific skills and confidence to navigate the new systems of recruitment, we're a bit stuck. Now, we talk about solutions, or one of the solutions I would say we desperately need at the moment would be those skills in the marketplace, not just for young people, but also for older workers, because you might want to return them at 50 or 60. It's not, it's ageless. So that was sort of my, I suppose, my comment. I'd love to hear the panel's thoughts on it.
Yes. Okay, well, we'll just take the third question over there, which I think was the chap at the, was it, or was it, there was a hand at the back. Oh, it was your hand, was it? Okay, sorry, I could just see the man behind you, but hey, I can see that you're not a man. Okay, yes, carry on.
We did a project last year working with employers in greater Manchester's growth sectors and young people from their backgrounds. So that employers get to hear directly from young people the barriers they experience, and together they developed a series of recommendations to help employers rethink their recruitment requirements and their approach. We generated a report which had recommendations for both employers as well as the local skills improvement plans. Now, some of the things that employers were saying to us is they didn't necessarily know their future skills needs. And I'm really keen to hear the panel's thoughts on, you know, with increasing automation and Gen AI, is there a concern that we don't know the future skills needs? How can we future-proof the workforce? And equally, how can we ensure that curriculum reform, which, you know, takes considerable time, how does that keep up the pace with all this technological change?
Well, thank you very much. So they can't get into schools, and then digital skills in the future. And of course, you know, the fact remains that a load of the jobs in the future haven't been invented yet. So it's quite difficult to, yes. Who wants to kick off with those ones? Oh, Lucy?
Yes. So first of all, the first one about access to schools. I mean, that's really sad, isn't it?
It is, it's very sad.
And I would, I don't know what to say in terms of that. Why wouldn't that school want somebody out? My view for my students is there's many different professionals in their lives, because some of them from these most hard to reach sort of areas, they only have a role model that, to be honest, frankly, you don't want them to have that role model. And then they only have their teacher at a college, and I want them to meet other professionals. And so we absolutely try and get as many employers in as possible, charities, all those sort of things. How we stop that happening, I think it goes back to my same old point. We have to make it in their interest to want to do that, and they're not measured by that. And so therefore there's no consequence for it. You would hope they'd do it for the good of their young people, but clearly that's not happening. So we're going to have to drive the behaviour in another way. In terms of digital skills, I think it's a really interesting point. We realised in COVID actually that we totally overestimated the digital skills of our young people. We thought they were really good at it, but it was a different type of digital skill. And we couldn't work out why they couldn't access Teams, and they couldn't, because then we really drilled down to it. Some of them didn't know what an email address was. And you find that's obvious now, really. When do they email anyone? They don't. But it's a different type of digital skill, isn't it, for the workplace that they're using now. And we're having a whole review of that, but also our staff as well, and how we're keeping. Some of our teachers are absolutely brilliant in their specialism. You know, we've got people from construction sector, etc., brilliant at bricklaying, brilliant at electrical engineering, but their digital skills aren't up there either yet. So we've got a whole kind of piece of work to do in that, and keeping up with the future of the skills. You're right, sometimes we speak to employers and thinking they know, and they don't. And that's, I think, where local skills improvement plans come in, and where we can work together to try and future-proof what we're being informed about for our students, upskilling our staff, working with our employer partners, all of those things. But that is a challenge, I have to admit, because we can use these funds at the moment to build lovely bits of equipment, and then you have white elephants because actually you realise employers don't know how to use them. We've got to upskill our staff and all those sort of things.
Could I just react to the upskilling and that part? I mean, there's a danger that you want to have a perfect model in terms of knowing exactly what the future skills are before we get going. I mean, what we've heard this afternoon is that there's a real challenge in attitude, behaviors, knowledge, understanding for a variety of professions, from bricklayers to hairdressers, which not everything is going to be impacted by AI. I think so. So while those future skills are important, they're not going to be directly impacting the 21% needs that we've been talking about, because they're going to walk before they can run. So I think there's a danger that we get only stuck by what's that and don't make some baby steps forward. The other thing, which I think we haven't spoken enough about, is employers also have a responsibility of getting people in and then upskilling them within their careers and within the employment that they have. And I think that's not been spoken about, and they have a role to play to upskill post. It's not about just getting people in, it's what do you do to give them pathways and give them career access. And then the point you made about, it does gall me to say, the employers are ready, which is the point you were making, but we put it back to schools. But I think if the schools are only measured by the, narrow academic achievements on maths and English and science, then they're not going to be looked at. What kind of employment are they providing, and pathways into workplace are they providing? And maybe that's something to balance out the scorecard of a teacher to some extent.
Yes. Sharon, any comments on this?
I'm just really interested in your question about the employers using AI to screen applications, and how people looking for jobs really need to sort of understand that. And I think from an equalities perspective, that's hugely problematic. And
Yes,
employers care about equality and inclusive practices, I think they would say, I'll be interested to hear what employers do every day, but need to be very wary of not using humans to look at people's applications that they've worked so hard to prepare.
Yes, yes, yes.
On that
Yes,
point,
yeah.
the social mobility employer index this year does ask a question if employers are using AI as part of their recruitment processes. Not necessarily, I don't believe, to assess, but purely to gather the information as to who is doing it and who isn't.
But humans can also screen out people.
Yeah.
So there's a challenge there as well. So there's something in between, isn't there, that's required?
Yes,
Add
yes.
a tiny bit of flavour to that. The idea of those tools is to remove the bias, as you say,
Yes.
but unfortunately, what's being discussed at the moment is the fact that there is bias built into the curriculum. That's the challenge.
Yes, yes. Joe?
Yeah, no, I fully agree. I think applying caution would be a very important thing with using AI in that context. I think on the point about the future skills needs for employers, AI comes back to AI again. That's one of the things alongside sustainability reporting standards and other sustainability related stuff. And they come out as sort of really high priority areas. And I think to the point on sort of upskilling members of the workforce, you know, on AI, again, this is something we looked at in our research on global talent trends, and one of the really kind of telling revelations from the data is that about half of the people we surveyed said that they were concerned that AI would replace part or all of their role. Probably not entirely surprising for a profession like accountancy. You know, when personal desktop computers came in and Excel came about to do these complex computations that humans used to have to do with a calculator and a piece of paper, and suddenly people thought they were going to be replaced. But it's, you know, what we try to, I think the lens to look at these things through is really around sort of the human relationship and the human partnership with technology to add value and to continue to develop. But it is really scary for people. So that kind of continuous learning, lifelong learning for people once they're in the job, but also recognition that this stuff is quite scary, this stuff is quite new, and it's not something that's going to be solved overnight, but applying caution certainly where people's livelihoods are involved in terms of careers and opportunities is really, really important.
Is there anybody else online, Claudia?
We've got quite a flurry online, so maybe we can do like an.
Okay, well, because we've just got time for the last round, well, I'll take the gentleman at the back, I think. Oh, and then there's another hand shot up there. Okay, and then the lady immediately, yes, and then if you can do a little roundup of people online. Okay, yes.
Thanks very much. And it is phenomenal to be in a room with people who are passionate about careers education. We are mandated from careers and responsibility from careers. So like the energy is great, and I certainly recognise a lot of what people have said. I think we can certainly see, you know, the value of careers education in some departments. See people say that, you know, we know where done well in careers education in our way disadvantage, you know, young people with disadvantaged backgrounds or lower essential skills, but done well careers education overwhelms that. We know that when schools are able to get to benchmarks, you know, their levels are 20% less likely to be me. I suppose my question is, are there any good examples, maybe from the council in particular? We know that, you know, at its best careers education, there is really good practice happening out there with many schools doing lots of good work, but it's a permeable kind of link between the local economy and the institution. Of course, we can always be better at doing that. But are you doing anything to think about the kind of skills you'll need in a few years' time and how, you know, because now to now is valuable. Is there work that you're doing to really kind of make sure young people are prepared for not what jobs are now, but what they are in the future?
The lady in front of you, yes. Was it? I thought there was a hand. Oh, was it your hand? I can't see the hands here. Oh, I thought, okay, well, it's your hand. Okay, well.
The country providing lots of mentoring conversations to help them articulate most of the want to and in the wider education sector, there's a lot of questions about integrating FE and HE as a tertiary system on its own.
Yes.
And I wonder if the panel had any views on what the blockers may be to that, if that's something which is desirable, and how that might work. because it feels like an either or right now. And that's a very hard thing for a young person to work through, even with a mentor one-on-one.
Yes, of course, there are far more FE colleges who are doing HE programs than HE, which is, so there is much more working together than there ever used to be, I think, on this, isn't it? Claudia, have you got some searing questions from the ether?
Yes, we've got sort of two themes. One is on careers advice and guidance. There's a comment and a particular comment around the Gatsby benchmarks and how about making them into actual legislation, at which point schools may begin to take employer contact and personal guidance much more seriously. That's Catherine Carruthers. And then leading on from that, Sharon Neary has also remarked on the Gatsby benchmarks and asks if the panel members could do one thing to deliver effective career support for young people, what would that one thing be? And we've also got a question from Sarah Welfare, who asks, what do the panel think about putting in place a national brokerage system to support SMEs to take on young people as apprentices?
That's interesting, yes. So take all the sort of admins. Of course, there are a lot of colleges who effectively do that, aren't there? So, you know, FE is a wonderful institution. They're very busy. Right, who wants to kick off on that little lot then? Yes, Lucy, why not? Yes, why not?
To the point about integrated FE and HE, there absolutely are some really successful partnerships between FE and HE. I think our particular challenge from our point of view is that there's a lot more HE doing level 3 work, foundation degrees, etc., which blurs it. I think partnerships would work really well if FE did FE and HE did HE, or there was a real agreement with how they complement each other. I think we see a number of students.
Partnerships, not competition.
Yeah, yes, yeah, exactly. And you know, and we were able to come together with our local partners and agree, right, you do that bit, we'll do this bit, this how it all complements, etc. I think that there's absolutely and that would be clear to that community. In terms of Gatsby benchmarks and legislation, I suppose I think there does need to be something that absolutely drives that behaviour. I think I've talked about that already, whether it's legislation or whether it's an enhanced inspection or something. I think we need to take a hard look at what would make schools change that behaviour. And then there was another one. What was the question, Kohli? One thing.
What was the one thing to deliver about effective career support for young people? What would it be? The one thing to do that?
I actually think at the moment, while there is Ofsted and it's controversial, etc., I've found the real drive for FE and really progressing with co-designed curriculum with employers is actually the enhanced inspection framework. I think that has driven FE's behaviours in that, and to have inspectors come in and speak to employers, speak to our district councils, our civil partnerships, they have to triangulate that. It has driven FE behaviour. I think if there was something like that for schools around careers, it might change something.
Right. Parminder, do you want to come in on one of these?
Well, yeah, maybe just quickly, I think many good points have been answered. Yeah, I agree on this. What is one thing you can do? I think there's somewhere a school needs to be measured, not just on academic, but in terms of how work ready people are.
Yes.
And I think in that context, you know, just at least a career advisor needs to know about the value of qualification and engage on that one-to-one basis, and the quality of that service being provided need to be part of how school is looked at. And then something which employers need to do is to then also give responsibility to employers to also make their pathways a bit more clearer so that they can signpost them better. But it takes two to tango there, but school needs to do that.
Yes, indeed. Comments, Joe?
I may miss some of the questions, but I think on the question about sort of future skills needs, again, I think that the thing to say on that, we're certainly from our perspective, I think always looking at curriculum, always looking at what's coming down the line, things around sustainability disclosure and some of the reporting standards, which are becoming more and more core to every business, regardless of the size, across the UK and internationally. And so things like that, we're always looking at the curriculum and how we can evolve it. And I think AI, technology, those kinds of areas feature really strongly in that as well. And I think the question about the one thing that you could do to sort of improve the career guidance piece is a really excellent question, really difficult one to sort of pin a tail on. But I would say, you know, at a high level, I think the how is probably the real challenge here. But I think it's about getting more employers in through the doors of education and in front of young people and inspiring young people, regardless of you know what background young person has or what profession might be or what the career pathway might be, but just that piece around linking up.
Yes, I think that is an important bit. Sharon?
Yeah, on the integration of HE and FE, I think one thing that would be really good is if moves could be made to not have such a clear distinction between academic and vocational routes, so that people can, you know, move in and out. They can do work experience as part of their degree. They can do part of a degree that they're not having to choose one or the other, but there's more flexibility. And in terms of the sort of one thing that could improve careers education, I think really looking at what our European neighbours are doing and what our neighbours within Great Britain are doing, because the England is really an outlier in terms of a very emaciated condition of its careers advice and information and guidance services.
Does Scotland and Wales and Northern Ireland do it better?
I think so.
Oh dear, that's bad news, isn't it? That's bad news. Right, have we got a last question? Because we've got about another 4 minutes, I think, before we wrap up, or we perhaps could, well, we could perhaps, you know, I don't know if any of you have got any sort of last comment you would like to leave us with. Shall we start with that then? Joe, have you got a last comment you would like to leave us with?
I think it's really important to keep the conversation going. I think that there's so much progress has already sort of happened within our profession and there's so much great work going on, but it's about trying to bring some of that together and look at the actionable steps. So we're always really keen to include actionable steps for employers when we produce things, but it's what one change can people make today to help move the needle in the right direction, even if it's not a perfect system and even if there's bigger things that are going to take a lot longer to solve. So I think taking action is really the most important thing.
Thank you very much, Sharon.
I think my one thing would be to bring young people into rooms whenever conversations like this are happening and whenever decisions are made, because they have such a so much richness to offer in terms of ideas, energy. They know from their experience what doesn't work, and they have really good ideas about what could work. So bring them into the room and let's see what they have to say.
That's good. Yes, Parminder?
I'll go back to where I started to say, well, all our policies and good intentions, we need to put it past the test of would it make any difference to 21% of our needs? And
Yes,
if it does,
yes.
then that's good.
Yes. And Lucy?
I think if we could introduce a system where we measured success in the way of progress from starting point to the end point, not just an exam, that would be really good, because people are starting in very different places in their lives.
Yes,
Success is different to many people, but actually there's huge amounts of success in young people. It doesn't have to be a passing exam.
Yes, no, that's absolutely true. And actually, if young people are giving confidence about learning something they're really interested in, very often that translates into better performance in schools, doesn't it? Things. So, well, thank you very much. This has been a fascinating discussion. So thank you very much to the 4 speakers and to the different questioners. I think we've all gone away with something to think about today. So a round of applause to our speakers. Now, I am told there is another half an hour for just enjoying yourselves, networking. So I think there might be coffee and tea there. Is there coffee and tea there? But anyway, do so, find somebody to talk to. But thank you all very much indeed. And I hope you enjoy visiting the House of Lords. This isn't really, you know, you don't get to see the House of Lords when you come to room G, really, do you? You get pulled in the back way and you just come straight here, but do come and visit us anytime, because it's your parliament and you're fully entitled to come and see us at any time and to sit in the public galleries and see what we're getting up to. Anyway, thank you very, very much indeed. That's very good. Thank you very much. Lovely to meet you. Yes, thank you very much indeed. That was really interesting. Yes. That's all right. There was another one that wasn't quite. Yes. Well, I'm hoping to get a question, so I will dash up.